Las Vegas Life of Betty Willis, Mother of Fabulous. The birth mother of Fabulous is Betty Willis. Arriving in a horse-drawn wagon, Willis's parents were among the first adventurous souls who journeyed to Las Vegas in 1905, the year William Clark's land auctions created the town. Willis's father, Stephen Whitehead, was employed as Clark County's first assessor. The youngest of 8 children, Betty Jane Whitehead was born on May 20th, 1923, right on the kitchen table in Overton, Nevada, about 60 miles northeast of Las Vegas. 2 weeks after her birth, her parents returned to Las Vegas, where her destiny awaited, to this city's eternal gratitude. Her father, Stephen Whitehead, built the first 2-story house in Las Vegas. The Mission Revival-style home, built in 1929, was on the National Register of Historic Places until it burned in 2000.
I grew up in a 2-story, the first 2-story residence that was ever built in Las Vegas. And it was a lovely home. Not fancy or ornate like they come, but it was Spanish. It had the stained cement floors with carpet in the middle and place to play jacks around the outside. And it was cool and quiet, even with 8 kids. We lived on South 7th Street, and a lot of the streets were dirt. The lamps hung on a wire in the middle of the street so we could rock them out. And we'd play hide and seek all up and down the street, all over town.
She fell in love with neon on girlhood trips to California, peering out of the family Studebaker at the theater marquees of downtown Los Angeles. Betty's daughter said her mother showed artistic talent from a young age. She created her own small newspaper with a fashion section when she was about 10, all hand-drawn and in color. Betty graduated from Las Vegas High School in 1941 and decided to go to the Los Angeles Art Center in Pasadena, California. She also took dance classes in Southern California, and when she returned, she opened a small dance studio in a local kindergarten class, as well as giving private lessons in foxtrot, waltz, and swing. She worked as a legal secretary and deputy clerk in the 8th Judicial Court of Nevada, which required dispensing appropriate attire to revealingly dressed divorcees-to-be. At least 4 or 5 times in my life, people said, "You better get a job at the courthouse because Las Vegas is about to go bust." In the 1940s, Betty moonlighted as one of the city's first commercial artists. She was designing newspaper ads for Vegas shows, perfecting showgirls kicking across the page. In the early 1950s, she began designing neon motel signs. Even then, Mrs. Willis, whose expletives are not of the G. Willikers variety, found she liked working in the world of men. Betty said, "I don't like working with a bunch of girls. They're inclined to talk."
I did the Moulin Rouge letters and the sign out front, and I went to the library and looked up everything French I could. That's how I came by that letter style.
Her first major project was a neon sign for the Moulin Rouge Casino. As an artist, Mrs. Willis liked typography best. The lifting cursive neon with the M about 12 feet tall dipped languorously below the canopy. She designed the Moulin Rouge sign with bold, swooping strokes to draw attention to the brazen ambition of the hotel, which catered to African-American clientele when the Vegas casino scene was segregated. "I wanted to make it as impressive and as happy and as good as I could," she said. When an arson fire destroyed much of the hotel in 2003, the sign survived, to Miss Willis's supreme satisfaction. She said, "When I build them, they last." The sign was restored by the Neon Museum and is currently on display. The 1950s Del Mar sign originally housed much of its neon tubing in the open space bordered by a perimeter of thin cabinetry. Betty Willis designed the Del Mar so that a single section of neon could be seen from both directions, an innovation that reduced the cost and labor to manufacture the sign. According to Willis, other sign companies soon followed suit. In 1957, Willis designed the Blue Angel Motel sign on Fremont Street, a revolving angel pointing her wand at the motel. She said, "I got criticized for depicting a super well-endowed angel. I said, well, show me an angel and I'll draw her." Betty was used to drawing showgirls for print ads.
In 2011, her original home, the Blue Angel Motel, closed down and was eventually torn down in 2015.
The renovation and her return to what is known as 5 Points, where Eastern, Fremont, and Charleston meet. And as the Blue Angel takes her spot back up on her perch, you can see subtle changes, taking her back to her original state, in her coloring, her gown, even the angle of the delicate wand she now holds.
And her colors were more subdued. Her skin was more of an eggshell kind of color, eggshell white. Her hair was more blonde, not so gold. She didn't have such stark makeup on. And it's important that we bring her back to how she was originally designed and colored, so that, again, the importance of going back to the history of Las Vegas, going back to how she looked in the 1950s and the affiliation she has with the city itself.
Mrs. Willis spent much of her career at Ad Art, creator of fabled Stardust sign, where she worked on cost estimates with engineers as well as on designs. Hotel signs called spectaculars evolved from watercolor and pencil renderings, drawn with the tip of a pencil that she said was sawed off and dipped in white ink because the raised dots were the right size for bulbs. The Stardust sign was the result of an all-night bowl session in which one of the first drawings was retrieved from the wastebasket. Ted Rogich, a salesman at Western Neon, pitched Clark County and the Las Vegas Resort Association on the idea of a sign to welcome visitors that would match the grand marquees of the casinos. Willis was Western Neon's lone artist. Willis was an absolutely phenomenal artist in our town who contributed so much to the city in the specialized art of art signs, facades, and other displays. When it went up in 1959, it was just another sign produced by Western Neon. Willis got as much credit as the welders and glassblowers who worked on the construction, which is to say not much at all.
I was working at Western Neon when I designed it, and that was my second job in the sign business, a small business owned by 3 men. And they had a salesman named Ted Rogish who contacted the county, and the county purchased the sign.
Later in life, she was often invited to give talks and such, and she was always asked why she didn't copyright it. She would always say, if I had copyrighted the sign, it probably wouldn't have been used as much and wouldn't be as famous, but it would be nice to have a dime for every time it's been used. Willis explained, in those days, a salesman would stand out in the street with the cars and a camera because you designed a sign around the hole, under and over the other signs. She said, at the time we were working on the sign, it only said, "Welcome to Las Vegas," but we all thought the town was fabulous, so we added the fabulous. Like many artists, Mrs. Willis is a perfectionist. She remains dissatisfied with the hand-drawn lettering of the word fabulous, which she considers amateurish. Betty said, I sweat blood when I take a good hard look at it. She has a point. Once you notice the way the F bears absolutely no resemblance to the abolish, it's difficult to unsee.
We would draw the signs on the board, hand draw everything. If you didn't quite fit the letters, you had to completely start over and lay them out again. It would take you hours and hours, something that you just type in now. But even to this day, I think that the paintings and drawings that they do are much more impressive and thrilling to the customers than the computer work. You're not going to replace art.
Willis's imagery was aesthetically influenced by Southern California designs, including Walt Disney's animated imagery. She said, I added a Disney star for happiness. The Googie influence is obvious with the stretched diamond shape that is typical of the mid-century modern style. At the time, the sign was seen as nothing more than one of those signs along the highways that told you what town you were now entering. Never in my wildest dreams did I think it would become as famous as it has, Willis said. I don't believe there is a greatest neon sign ever in Las Vegas, she explained. But it's become a beloved icon to the city. It's a good feeling to know that you have created something that did what it was intended to do, maybe something that would be recognized and remembered. I do take pride that the sign, in the end, worked out quite nicely for Las Vegas.
I know what recognition, repetitive advertising and recognition will do, and I think anything we can do to get the tourists here, the better.
Betty says she lives for the smell, the feel, the beauty of the desert, and the sign was born of that love. I love the desert, and I have a lot of pride in Las Vegas, Willis says, beaming. Willis's favorite sign was the one atop the old Mint Hotel. I remember flying back from Reno once. I'd fallen asleep, and it was such a short flight. I woke up and saw that sign and said, wow, Reno has a Mint sign just like ours. All that work garnered her only $90 a week in wages, which she remarked was pretty good pay for a girl. She commented later that most people were surprised to find out a woman had designed the sign. It was a man's business back then. It wasn't a woman's field because when you work with neon signs, you have to not only design them, but you have to learn the nuts and bolts of how neon light and electricity work. You have to learn about pressure points and weight and wattage of lamps. You work with engineers as well as artists. Most women back then weren't interested in such technical stuff.
I went to work at Young's. That was my first neon job in about 52. I was the only commercial artist here. All my life I've worked in that trade, which is a man's trade. There have been very few women in it at all. You could do exactly the same work and not make the man's wage, but I never was really interested or bitter about it. I was having so much fun working in the trade that it didn't really affect my life that much.
There were 2 attempts by casino executives to replace the welcome sign in the 1970s and 1990s because it was perceived to be outdated. Betty Willis told the Review-Journal in 1998 that as the welcome sign became outdated, she grew skirmish about how long it stayed up. But by the late 90s, the sign became stylish again. The sign was featured on the Las Vegas Centennial Plate in 2005, and it was the most popular specialty plate in Nevada. Those plates generated $2.1 million in 1 year for historic preservation projects in Las Vegas. Betty Willis had her own license plate that read, My Sign, and some of her motel signs have been restored using money that was raised from the sale of the Centennial plates, including the Blue Angel Motel sign. In 2005, the New York Times interviewed Betty Willis about the welcome sign, and she said, I think everyone in the world read the article and traveled here to talk to Mayor Oscar Goodman and to myself, and that's quite an experience. It's overwhelming. Asked how she felt about the sign being used rampantly, she said, My dad used to be Chamber of Commerce president, and I think he'd be proud. Almost 50 years after she designed the diamond-shaped icon in 2008, Betty Willis finally is making a little extra cash off the welcome sign. Willis signed limited edition prints. When members of the Nevada National Guard were stationed in Kuwait, they recreated the sign for their camp, then sent a photo to Willis. She met them at Nellis Air Force Base when they returned from active duty. Her daughter explained that we were in a doctor's office and a guy had it tattooed on his calf. My mom looked at it and went, Oh my gosh, my sign. The guy looked up and said, Will you sign my leg for me? Willis demurred.
It's been fun seeing how widely accepted and how many people that I meet tell me how much they love it, which amazes me. And it's home to them. They would say, when I see the sign, I know I'm home. And I think that's one reason the locals like it. They don't want it taken down because it's one of the few things that hasn't been imploded.
She was very mild-mannered and low-key with a really fun, dry sense of humor, but she didn't understand the fuss when people wanted to interview her, her daughter says. But there is a sense of legacy about her. She will be immortal. Willis made more money off the welcome sign when she and her daughter sold silkscreen t-shirts with the design. Willis volunteered her time to put on many presentations to arts organizations and cultural groups on her art and her design work. She was honored by the Las Vegas Centennial Committee at the S2 Arts Center in downtown Las Vegas at its 50 Years of Fabulous Neon celebration, where she called it the little sign that could. I began to appreciate what she did when I was around 16, Betty's daughter recalls. I was with my friends driving down the strip, and I could count on one hand the signs she did not have something to do with, either a redo or a total drawing of a sign. Betty Willis once told me one of her favorite stories about the welcome sign. She was going to the sign before it had a parking lot to be interviewed by PBS. When she stepped from the cab, a limousine pulling off the side of the road nearly clipped her as she stood maybe 20 feet from the legendary sign. The limo was carrying a group of tourists also planning to pose for an iconic shot. The cab driver was furious. He was shouting, "Do you know who you almost ran over? She designed that sign." Even the accolades were overwhelming. People always want me to take pictures in front of the sign with showgirls or something, she said. It gets to be a burden. Mrs. Willis eventually stopped giving interviews to countless journalists curious about the kitschy sign. In June of 2008, Betty made her final public appearance to talk about the welcome sign during a panel discussion with her friend Brian Buzz Lemming, who was famous for designing the Hacienda Horse and Rider sign, along with the original Rio, Aladdin, and Caesar's Palace signs. Both of them died on the same day 7 years later.
I did many, many motels along the Strip and Fremont. It's hard for me to even remember. When I go by them, I know I did that one. And now I'm 77 years old and having fun on the internet. Yes, I'm history itself. I think what fascinates people about the sign is that somebody's actually living that. I mean, let's face it, it's been up there before most of you got here. And I think it just blows people away that somebody's still living that designed it.
She retired at 77 and worked part-time for a silkscreen business run by her daughter. Mrs. Willis has been divorced twice, and she raised her daughter, a former crime scene investigator, solo. She enjoyed men as colleagues. Husbands were a different matter entirely. Jerks, she exclaimed. The first one drank too much, but he was cute. Betty moved back to Overton to work on a book called The Woman Behind the Sign, but it was never published. The sign has never been copyrighted, although Yesco has trademarked the image. However, it is not their policy to restrict use of the image unless they deem that use to have a negative impact. As a result, the image has been used widely for commercial purposes. Betty Willis died at 91 on April 19, 2015 in Overton. Major media outlets in the US and UK reported on her death.
News about the death of a Las Vegas legend. Betty Willis, the creator of the Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas sign, has died. Clark County Commissioner Steve Sisolak issuing this statement right here, which reads in part, "Nothing says Las Vegas like Betty Willis's Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas sign. The fact that everyone loves that sign and its design after all these years is a testament to Betty's talents. There is probably no bigger Las Vegas icon than that sign."
Clark County declared May 5, 2015, Betty Willis Day.
At today's meeting, they paid tribute to Betty Willis, the designer of the Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas sign. Willis, an Overton native, passed away last month at the age of 91.
Jeff Young, Senior Vice President of Yesco, said, "The thing that strikes us is that Betty remains so humble about her contribution and so reserved about her gift to the city."
I've had a lot of fun seeing how it's been accepted, and being a loyal Las Vegan, I really am pleased that it's done the good it has for the town. I think it's made Mama proud.